We have this inherent tendency to being fairly useless at learning from the past. We only need to read through the Judges to see it time and time again. Now, you've probably heard it said that Jesus isn't far off returning and that he's going to bring with him the kingdom. Now, I can't say a day or hour, but what I can say for sure is that the kingdom is only one lifetime away for each of us. So here we stand today on the edge of the kingdom. And we have a choice. Do we repeat history or do we learn from it? Let's go back in time. Let's rewind 40 years from Joshua chapter 2. And look into the story of the first time spies were sent in to the promised land. The first time God's children stood on the edge of the kingdom. And the story goes, Moses is told by God to get together 12 leaders of the children of Israel, one from each tribe. And he's told to send them into the land to spy it out. And so 12 spies are picked, and they're named these leaders of the people. And Moses gives them instructions. He says, when you go into the land, find out whether the people are weak or if they're strong. Find out if they're few or many. Tell me whether the land is good or bad. Tell me, do they have walled villages or unwalled? Do they have good soil or bad soil? Do they have trees or do they not? And the 12 go into the land of Israel, the promised land, and they spy it out for 40 days. And they come back with this report. The land is good. It truly is flowing with milk and honey. But the people are strong. They are many, and they live in walled villages. And they spread this bad report through the people. Right on the edge of the kingdom, they start to grumble. They say, if only we had died in the land of Egypt. Oh, if only we had died in this wilderness. Why is it the Lord is bringing us into the land to fall by the sword? Doesn't this sound familiar? Well, it is. Earlier on, they say, why did you bring us out of Egypt? To make us and our children and livestock die of thirst. And then earlier again, they say, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us into the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? We have this progression. The children of Israel, the children of God, not learning from the grace given to them earlier. And they start to complain. There's a scene in the movie Shrek where Shrek and Donkey are crossing a rickety old bridge over a lava pit. And they get more than halfway there, very close to the end of the bridge, and Donkey cracks a rotten board and almost falls through, and Shrek catches him. And when this happens, Donkey turns around and is ready to walk right back the other way. And Shrek says, no, but that's the wrong way. We need to go over the bridge. We're so close to getting there. And Donkey replies, as probably we all do too often, but I know that part of the bridge is safe. And that's what the children of Israel have done here, isn't it? And they've gone through these trials, they've gone through these struggles, and they've been provided for by the Lord. Yet they're not willing to test whether they can make it those last few steps into the kingdom. And the children of Israel start complaining. And Joshua and Caleb say to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. And at this, the children of God look to kill Joshua and Caleb. And God steps in. And God says to the people that because they were not faithful, that they will not get to see the promised land, that they'll wander around in the wilderness for 40 years. And I want to especially look up Numbers chapter 14, verse 33. And this verse reads, your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness, until the last of your bodies lies in the desert. So God says, for your unfaithfulness, they will wander around for 40 years. So now we fast forward 40 years to the story we just had read in Joshua 2. Joshua secretly sends 2 spies into the land. And these 2 spies don't seem to make it very far and don't seem to spend very long as they're caught that all they have done is gotten into the city and hidden in Rahab's house. And Rahab has to quickly hide the spies underneath the flax she's got drying on the roof. And the king's men come searching. The fear of the people is shown. It's evident as they're looking to eradicate these 2 people spying out the land. And Rahab diverts the soldiers coming to look for the spies and tells them to go outside the city. And this is where Rahab tells the spies that the whole nation is quaking with fear because they remember. They're the ones that remember the things that God has done to the children and for the children of Israel. The things that 40 years ago, the children of Israel didn't even remember themselves. And so these two spies have to trust in Rahab to hide them. And then Rahab puts her trust in the two spies and says, when you come back, please remember me. And the deal is made, as we remember in Joshua chapter 2. The deal is made that when they come back, if that scarlet cord is in the window, they will pass over Rahab's house. And all the inhabitants in her house will be saved. And then the spies go and they have to hide themselves in the mountains for 3 days. Now, I want you to imagine this. You're being hunted down. You're trusting a total stranger who tells you, go hide in the mountain for 3 days and then go home. As each day passes, would you start to wonder, did they betray us? Should we be going back already? Is this a trap? 3 days is a long time. 3 days is a long time to be trusting a total stranger to not dob you in. But they trust. And they manage to get back to Joshua. And they go back to the edge of the kingdom. And they report to Joshua what had happened to them. We can see this in that last verse in Joshua chapter 2. And it reads, and they said to Joshua, in the second to last verse, then the two men started back. They went down out of the hills, forded the river, and came to Joshua son of Nun, and told him everything that had happened to them. And this is interesting because if we remember back 40 years beforehand, when the 12 spies come back, the 12 spies report on the things that they saw. And now the two spies come back and they report everything that had happened, the trust they had to endure, the fear of the people that they were about to go and conquer. I'd like us all to look up 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 7. It's a very short verse, but is the crux of the exhort this morning. So in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 7, we read, "We live by faith, not by sight." What does that mean? We stand on the edge of the kingdom, and what does it mean to live by faith and not by sight? And we've got these two examples, and as we read earlier, it was the first incidents of spying. The 12 spies didn't go into the land because of their unfaithfulness. They saw, but they did not have the faith. Now Joshua sends in 2 spies, and they come back and report not what they saw, but they report what happened. They report the trust they had to endure. They report the trust that Rahab is enduring, waiting for the children of Israel to come. You see, faith cannot thrive unless we empty ourselves of our self-reliance. If we live totally by sight, we are putting it all on our self-reliance. And our faith cannot grow. It cannot thrive. But when we empty our self-reliance, like the 2 spies had to do, they had to just trust, then their faith started to thrive. They knew that they could accomplish, with God's help, getting into the kingdom. And the stories go further than this, don't they? The stories continue. After God has told the children of Israel off 40 years ago in the wilderness, they feel guilty. And they go up, they put on their arms, and they go up to fight against Moses' instructions. And they get struck down. But in comparison, we have Joshua, who gets visited by an angel of the Lord's armies. And the angel gives Joshua instructions on how to conquer this city, Jericho. And the angel says to Joshua, you need to march around the city for 7 days. But on the 7th day, you need to march around 7 times. And you know what? Joshua seems to have learnt the lesson, because there isn't a next verse after that that says, why? If you were told to march around a city and then the walls would fall down, would that not be the next obvious question? How? But Joshua seems to have learnt the lesson. He trusts that that is the right way to do it, and he'll follow in faith. So what does this mean for us? To stand on the edge of the kingdom, knowing that we need to live by faith and not by sight. Let's look up Matthew 24, starting from verse 6 to 13. I'm sure this is a section of scripture we all know pretty well. But let's read it with this view on faith versus sight. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen. But the end is still to come. Nations will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines, earthquakes in various places. These are the beginnings of birth pains. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you'll be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from their faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. We have here in Matthew 24 some warnings, some things to see. It's easy to see wars and rumors of wars. It's easy to see famines and earthquakes. And at this point, Jesus was saying, when you see these things, you know you are on the edge of the kingdom. But it's not the seeing that is going to take that step into the kingdom. Being able to see the edge of the kingdom is not what makes it. Verse 13. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. It's not the seeing. The seeing will let us know where the edge of the kingdom is. But it's the standing firm, the trusting that our God is going to take us in. It's that standing on the promise that he wants us to enter the kingdom that is going to, as verse 13 says, that is going to end with us being saved. So, we have one lifetime until the kingdom. We are on the edge of the kingdom. We can use our sight to see that. But let us use our faith to stand firm on the promise so that we may be saved.